looking back on the past 7 years, one of the biggest things that you have done as an administration is issue a lot of waivers from the No Child Left Behind law, as Congress has not been able to pass a bill, and we have at least a bipartisan agreement from the Education Committee in the Senate, but we're still waiting and waiting. And so I wanted to talk about if there's something you would have done differently about the waivers, because it does seem like the push for certain conditions being tied to them with the college and career-ready standards, as well as the teacher evaluations, is what has sort of created a very big or a growing opposition to testing in general. And would you have done something differently, looking back on what the reaction has been?
Well, it's actually interesting that yes, there's always some pushback, but I think the story that reporters usually don't cover is that when folks are working pretty well together, and I would argue the fact that we have north of 40 states that we're partnering with across the political spectrum in pretty creative ways and have given them a lot of flexibility, and you had almost no noise working with those states, it's been very, very positive. What I would have done differently, honestly, would have been probably to do them earlier. We were really hopeful that fixing No Child Left Behind would happen. I always said waivers were always plan B. It was not something we wanted to do. I'd rather fix the law. We can get into it. I think we have a legitimate chance now. I don't know how great a chance, but the best chance we've had in a while. But we spent a long, long time, a couple years ago, trying to get the law fixed. And it was the right thing to do. You had to give every effort. But the fact that the law has so many perverse incentives, the fact that the law, in my mind, was doing so much to hurt teachers and students and schools, in hindsight, had we known that it was impossible to get Congress to stop being so dysfunctional then, if anything, we would have gone to the waiver package earlier.
But was there, speaking of timing, was there something that you could have done to maybe stagger the timing of the introduction of the standards and the introduction of the evaluations? Because that seems to be in states where it has gone smoother, it does seem like they've paced out the evaluations.
Well, again, it's 40 different states, so there are 40 different models. To be clear, standards weren't something we came up with. These, as you know, are standards that governors and educators came up with in the 90s. This was not a new idea. It was simply folks saying we're tired of dumbing down standards. It's one of the worst perverse incentives in No Child Left Behind is about 20 states reduced standards to make politicians look good. And you had people saying this is not the right thing for kids or for education or for our states or for our state's economy, and them stepping up and do it. You can have lots of hindsight and Monday morning quarterbacking about the sequence of events or the timing. At the end of the day, I feel a real sense of urgency. I just think we've made some real progress. We're thrilled that high school graduation rates are all-time highs. We're thrilled that dropout rates are down. From 2008 to 2012, we have 1.1 million additional students of color, not just graduating, but going to college. That's a huge, huge deal. But what keeps me up at night is our graduation rate is still not high enough, and our dropout rate is still unacceptably high. And reducing standards is not the answer to any of those issues. So in a perfect world where you didn't have real kids, maybe you could take 10 or 20 years to do this. But I say all the time, our kids have one chance to get a great education. And growing up working here on the south side of Chicago in a very poor community, running the Chicago public schools where 85% of our kids live below the poverty line, this is their one chance. It's got to be the great equalizer. So it has been a lot of change. It's been a lot of change fast. It's absolutely been rocky and bumpy in some places. But at the end of the day, if anyone would have thought 4 or 5 or 6 years ago that the vast majority of states would actually be raising standards, the fact that we have graduation rates at all-time highs, we've come a long way. For me, the question really is, how do you get better faster? How do we continue to accelerate the pace of change?